Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Transpose for the live performance exercises in Module 3. And so, same idea, we'll open up our Rot 13 translator, we're going to deobfuscate the code, and in case you're noticing a spring in my voice, or step as it were, it's because you don't actually have to write an assertion function for this one. And I don't like writing assertion functions. They are definitely a good thing, and they're very, very useful, but they're mildly annoying to write. So I'm kind of happy that this one doesn't require one. Now the reason it doesn't require one is because rather than a specific output being necessary, we're going to see in a moment that the code is mostly asking for you to output something in a specific format. So we need to output it, make sure that the format looks like it should, and it should say should output. Yeah, no, that really should be should output, so hopefully I'll change that before anything too terrible goes wrong for you all. However, the idea that it should return a string that outputs like that, maybe that's what you're supposed to get, so perhaps I won't change it and it's just supposed to be difficult. But in any case, we're not going to need an assertion function either way, because I really just want to essentially call a test case that would look something like this, and just console.log it. And we're going to console.log two other versions of this, and you'll see in a moment why. And the idea is that there are essentially two edge cases with this one. One is where the first string is longer than the second string, and one is where the opposite of what I just said. So I've been doing some things and things some. So essentially, if we console.log all three of these, and they look the way that they ought to, and the output on the right side of the console looks right, then we can justifiably say that we have done our code correctly. Anyway, also going to throw in two console.logs of just new line symbols, and all that's going to do is just put some nice delimiters in between our outputs here. So, function's called Transpose Two Strings, and it looks like it takes, you give it an array that contains two strings, so we'll say array input, sure. So for array input, there's a couple ways that we can do this, and I'm going to do it in a rather verbose way, which is we're probably going to create more aliases than we actually need, but that's okay. So we'll say create alias for first string, create alias for second string. If you don't remember what an alias is, that's not a big problem. We'll go over it in just a moment here. And we're going to create a variable for the longer string. And then we want to determine which is the longer string. So after we've done that, essentially just as if you're going to get an idea of what we're doing here, we want to be able to transpose these two strings. And we're going to do that by iterating over one of them and then just kind of adding the letters in an appropriate fashion. Looks like a space in between them, and then a new line symbol after each one. So the first letter of the first string, first letter of the second string. But the problem would be once we get down to line 12, if these aren't the same length, we're going to have a situation where one of them is going to be undefined because it has a shorter length. So let's say that we had, hellos. We want S here, but there's nothing. It's undefined for the second string at that position because it ended already. So the way that we're going to get around that is that in the event that it is undefined, we're going to add an empty space. And it's like, oh, where does it say to do that? It doesn't. And again, what we're trying to do here is demonstrate a thought process that elicits in the interviewer an appreciation of our understanding. Wow, that's a really terrible way to say that. Basically, you want the interviewer to think that you know your way around JavaScript and code. And even if you reason about the problem incorrectly, sometimes, especially on the more difficult problems, if your reasoning is kind of internally consistent and you made a mistaken assumption, that won't even be that big of a deal. Perhaps, an ideal case would be you actually clarify your assumptions with the interviewer, and you should do that. But provided that you're actually working off of a solid, provided that you're working solidly off of an assumption, the idea that the assumption is incorrect doesn't end up being that big of a deal because the first case implies that you could, upon changing that assumption, do the problem correctly the other way. So now that we've dispensed with all of that, let's go ahead and jump back to the problem. So once we have this, we actually need a result string. So create a result string. And if we're going to create a result string, we probably want to return a result string. So in here is where we're going to make use of the longer string. We essentially want to iterate over the length of longer string. Now inside of here, we're going to create a couple of aliases, and we're also going to do something called short circuit assignments. And they're fun because they're actually a nice way to very cleanly assign a variable to the value of something or something else based on the idea that if the value of the first item is undefined or falsy, it's going to default to the second option. It's kind of a cool little trick. So we're going to say set first, and we'll say set first, character or something, to first strings length, not length, current letter or empty space. We're going to say set second to second strings current letter or empty space. Then we're going to add first, space, second, and a new line. That is pretty much it. Well, to our result string, of course. But after we've done all of that, that's pretty much the end of the problem. So let's go ahead and start creating our code. So say first string is equal to array input, add 0. I'm going to copy this and just kind of alter it for the second string. Second string is equal to array input at 1. Determine a variable for the longer string. Well, let's not get too fancy. Determine longer string. Okay, so we'll pretty much say something like if first string is greater than or equal to the second string, we could consider that either of them or the first string are going to be the longest string. So we'll say longer string is equal to first string. Otherwise, we want longer string to be equal to second string. Now that we have that, we'll keep going, create our result string. Now result string is actually going to be an empty string. We're going to return it at the end. Iterate over the length of the longer string. No reason to use anything other than a simple for loop here. That's actually a wildly inaccurate statement. There's plenty of reasons to use all kinds of different loops here, but we're going to use a for loop because I like for loops. So longer dot string dot string. Longer, I wanted to type string, wasn't sure why. Longer string dot length, there we go. I plus plus. I like for loops because I think it's a good idea to use the basics until you are so familiar with them that you can, without altering your understanding of the code, like what the code is doing, you can exchange various styles of code, and I just think that's a better progression, right? Rather than being like, hey, you can create a string, and here are 7 different ways you can do it. It's like, well, maybe learn how one way to create a string and then do it a bunch of times, and then later on, maybe learn the other ways to do it. Once you have a good idea of how creating a string fits into the larger context of a program or a system, and the same thing for a lot of these. So that's why most of these are for loops. There'll probably be a section I'll put in after this trying to go back and like redo these with higher order functions or something like that. But for now, we want something like set first to first. If we call it first, we might run into some problems. So let's call it first character. And we'll set that equal to, and this is that short circuiting thing that we're talking about, right? So this is going to be equal to the first string, set first to first string's current letter. So first string at I, but we need to operate under the possibility that this might at some point become undefined, because we know that there is a longer string, we know the length, but we don't actually know which one it is in the order yet. We don't know if the longer string refers to the first string or if it refers to the second string, so we have to do this for both. So this is that short circuit operator that I was talking about. This assignment is going to be made to this unless this is undefined, in which case whatever we put on this side of the OR statement or operator is going to be assigned to first character. So it looks exactly like this. We're going to do the same thing for second. Say second character is equal to second string at I, or an empty space. Then we're going to add to our result. We shouldn't even call it result, should we? That's kind of weak. Let's call it transpose string. That might not be better, but it is different. Okay, we'll leave it as that. So anyway, transpose string plus equals, and this is going to be a relatively short walk through our aliases. first character plus a space in between them plus second character plus a new line symbol, and that should do the trick. So just to go over again, create an alias for each one, determine the longer string and assign it to either the first or second, create a result string called transpose string, iterate over the length of the longest string, assign the first character to be whatever the value of the first string at the current level of iteration is, or in the event that it's undefined, assign it to an empty space, and that's what this short circuit operator does. Same thing for the second character. Then we're going to add to the transpose string our first character, a space, a second character, and a new line symbol. Then finally we'll return the new transposed string. We have 3 examples, and this should output in that nice kind of format that looks like this, plus a couple for some things and then things some. So let's run and see what we did wrong. Looking pretty good. Okay, cool. So that's pretty much it for this problem. I'm going to go ahead and copy all of this and put it back in the input window, but we're probably going to get that very similar to what we've been getting. You know, the test should be tests or something. Yeah, there you go. So anyway, most of your work's going to happen in here, as it has been for the rest of the problems in this unit, or sorry, this module. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.